Elon Musk has just locked SpaceX into the most dangerous financial trap in corporate history, and the newly released audited numbers prove the crisis is far worse than anyone imagined. For over a decade, investors and space enthusiasts alike have treated this rocket company as the ultimate crown jewel of private enterprise, a multi-trillion-dollar vehicle destined to carry humanity to the stars. But a deep dive into the highly confidential S1 prospectus reveals that the dream of Mars is being actively cannibalized to fund an entirely different war on Earth. Elon Musk has quietly executed a massive pro forma consolidation, forcing rocket investors to absorb the staggering operational losses of a toxic social media platform and a cash-strapped artificial intelligence startup. The rockets are still flying, but underneath the surface, SpaceX has transformed into a massive cash incinerator that burned through billions of dollars in a desperate bid to dominate terrestrial AI. By continuing to watch this investigation, you will discover the hidden cross-subsidies draining Starlink's profits, the terrifying engineering failures that the public relations team tried to cover up, and the classified military contracts that have fundamentally altered the company's DNA. What you are about to see is not just a story of balance sheet deficits, but a cold calculation that ties the financial survival of Elon Musk's empire to the active machinery of global warfare. If you want to understand how the world's most valuable aerospace giant is being leveraged to the absolute brink, hit that subscribe button right now, because the real numbers tell a story that Wall Street is completely terrified to face. The illusion of a seamless journey to orbit completely shattered on May 20th, 2026, when the official paperwork for the upcoming initial public offering was finally dragged into the light. For years, analysts were forced to rely on unconfirmed media leaks and heavily curated press releases to estimate the health of this private empire. The narrative was pristine: Falcon 9 rockets dominating the global launch market, Starlink satellites blanket covering the globe with high-speed internet, and a historic valuation climbing toward $1.75 trillion. But the audited financial statements required for the public listing tell a profoundly different story, exposing a structural reality built on three deeply asymmetric business segments: space, connectivity, and AI. While the public focus remains fixed on the spectacular theater of deep space exploration, the consolidated financial metrics reveal a corporate entity in severe capital distress. In the full year of 2025, the combined operations of SpaceX registered a staggering consolidated net loss of $4,937 million. Far from stabilizing, this capital hemorrhage accelerated violently into the first 3 months of 2026 alone, with the company burning an additional $4,276 million in just 90 days. The principal indebtedness of the company has quietly ballooned to $29,100 million, leaving the entire enterprise dangerously exposed. To understand how a company with a near monopoly on space travel can lose this much money this quickly, one must look directly at the hidden internal friction between Musk's grand interplanetary ambitions and the brutal reality of his terrestrial corp. The true scale of this crisis begins to take shape inside the carefully protected vaults of the Securities and Exchange Commission, where a deleted accounting disclosure from an early draft of the registration statement exposes exactly how much it costs to fuel Elon Musk's computational ambitions. PitchBook researchers, tracking the confidential paperwork, discovered a highly sensitive financial line item that corporate attorneys scrubbed from the final public prospectus. The original, unedited text revealed that the initial data center clusters in Memphis, Tennessee, were built at an extraordinary capital efficiency of $2,700,000 per megawatt. In the hyper-competitive world of artificial intelligence infrastructure, that figure represents a staggering four-fold optimization over the standard industry benchmark for server farm construction. On the surface, this unprecedented cost efficiency looks like a classic engineering triumph, a signature validation of the ultra-lean production methodology that made the Falcon 9 rocket a global monopoly. In reality, this deleted disclosure exposes a far more desperate corporate strategy, proving that the entire artificial intelligence segment was structurally incapable of generating its own survival capital. Elon Musk did not build this hyper-optimized supercomputer network to serve a surging commercial demand for his proprietary chatbot, Grok. Instead, he built it to function as a raw utility engine, a high-stakes real estate play designed to extract survival capital. The financial lifeline that kept this entire consolidated empire from a catastrophic cash crunch arrived in May 2026, wearing the logo of its primary artificial intelligence competitor. Anthropic, the heavily capitalized creator of the Claude large language model, signed a massive long-term cloud services agreement to lease compute capacity directly from the newly formed SpaceX AI division. Under the strict terms of this binding contract, Anthropic is legally committed to paying SpaceX a staggering $1,250 million every single month for a continuous 3-year period. That calculates out to an astronomical $15 billion a year in guaranteed, recurring service revenue flowing directly into the corporate coffers of ticker symbol SPCX. For Anthropic, the transaction was an absolute operational necessity born out of severe computational starvation. Despite achieving a spectacular annualized revenue run rate of $30 billion by April 2026, largely driven by the explosive commercial adoption of its automated developer ecosystem, Claude Code, Anthropic was suffocating under severe server constraints. Throughout late 2025, the platform was forced to progressively tighten rate limits on its premium consumer and enterprise tiers, turning away millions in potential revenue because it literally lacked the raw computing power to process the incoming queries. The $15 billion annual check to SpaceX represents a massive operational tax that will severely suppress Anthropic's independent profitability, but it provided for Elon Musk. The Anthropic lease represents a brilliant, cold-blooded financial rescue mission that completely rewrites the risk profile of his data center build-out. When you run the mathematical equation using the deleted S1 construction cost disclosure, the predatory efficiency of this real estate play becomes shockingly clear. At a development cost of $2,700,000 per megawatt, a standard 100-megawatt supercomputer cluster requires an upfront capital outlay of $270 million. By charging Anthropic $1,250 million a month, SpaceX is positioned to completely recoup its entire capital expenditure for a cluster in less than 7 days of live operation. Even if the actual, real-world construction costs in Memphis were double or triple the figures stated in the deleted prospectus draft, the entire infrastructure investment pays for itself in less than a month. At $15 billion annually, this single cloud rental agreement almost perfectly matches the combined 2025 revenue of SpaceX's core rocket launch and Starlink satellite internet segments combined. While Elon Musk publicly captures the global imagination with grandiose pronouncements about achieving artificial general intelligence and preserving the consciousness of humanity, his actual financial survival has been secured by acting as an ultra-lucrative corporate landlord, renting out server racks to the very. Yet, this massive influx of rental revenue carries a profound structural vulnerability that public stock market investors are completely ignoring. The sustainability of this $15 billion annual cash flow is deeply dependent on Anthropic's continued ability to secure massive rounds of venture capital funding to pay its monthly bills. Because the cloud infrastructure deal does not inherently generate new, high-margin software revenue for Anthropic, it simply shifts their existing, compute-starved customers onto leased servers, meaning their core operating margins are set to decline precipitously in the third quarter of 2026. The moment the venture capital market cools, or if Anthropic's subscriber retention falters under the weight of these massive infrastructure costs, the primary pillar supporting SpaceX's AI revenue could instantly evaporate. To prevent his corporate empire from being perceived as a mere raw utility provider, Musk realized he needed an immediate, high-profile software asset to justify the company's $2 trillion valuation. This underlying desperation explains why, immediately following the closing of the historic public listing, SpaceX moved to execute a stunning $60 billion defensive acquisition of Anisphere. The targeted buyout of Cursor represents a direct attempt to capture the absolute center of the modern software development landscape. Cursor has emerged as the dominant platform for the rapidly expanding trend of vibe coding, a paradigm shift where traditional software developers transform into high-level editors, utilizing autonomous AI agents to draft, refactor, and deploy massive enterprise-grade codebases via simple conversational prompts. The platform competes directly against Anthropic's Claude Code and OpenAI's Codex, making it the ultimate battleground for developer mindshare. By absorbing Cursor directly into the SpaceX AI segment, Musk is executing a massive data grab, attempting to ingest the proprietary, real-world interactions and keystrokes of hundreds of thousands of expert software engineers to rapidly train the upcoming Grok 5 model. If the integration succeeds, it could theoretically close the immense performance gap between Musk's proprietary models and the industry leaders. However, the financial architecture of this $60 billion transaction reveals a high-stakes gamble that places the acquisition of Anisphere is structured completely in Class A common stock of SpaceX, creating an intense short-term incentive mechanism that explains the chaotic price action of ticker symbol SPCX post-listing. Because the purchase price is fixed at $60 billion, a surging stock price during the opening weeks of public trading meant SpaceX would only need to issue a minimal number of new shares to fulfill the contract, effectively protecting insider equity from severe dilution. But if the public market lost confidence and the share price declined, the number of new shares required to hit that $60 billion target would explode exponentially. In a worst-case scenario where the stock experiences a prolonged post-IPO correction, the resulting equity issuance risks diluting the existing public float by a staggering 80%. This structural setup effectively transferred the immense speculative risk of a pre-revenue software startup onto the public markets, forcing everyday investors to subsidize a multi-billion-dollar defensive maneuver in the Silicon Valley talent war. Are you starting to see the true pattern behind this massive consolidation? Hit the comments section below right now and let me know if you believe Elon Musk's transition from rocket pioneer to AI server landlord is a stroke of financial genius or a desperate corporate shell game. The initial public euphoria that greeted the opening bell on the Nasdaq exchange quickly gave way to a sobering confrontation with fundamental economic reality. After briefly peaking past a $2 trillion market capitalization on day one, driving Elon Musk's paper net worth to a historic $1.1 trillion, the stock fell 5% for 2 consecutive days by the middle of the following week. This sharp institutional correction dragged the total market value of SpaceX directly below that of Amazon, highlighting the immense speculative premium embedded in the company's valuation. When you place the audited financial realities of these two corporate giants side by side, the absurdity of the current market pricing becomes impossible to defend. Amazon generated over $717 billion in revenue and a staggering $78 billion in pure net income during 2025, completely self-funding its massive global logistical network and cloud data infrastructure through predictable operational cash flow. SpaceX, across its entire consolidated empire, brought in a minuscule $18.7 billion in revenue while registering a multi-billion-dollar net loss, all while carrying a capital expenditure budget that has more than quintupled in less than 24 months. To justify the current valuation multiple of ticker symbol SPCX, the core rocket launch and satellite internet business would need to achieve a near-impossible 60-fold expansion over the next 10 years. Such a trajectory is physically prevented by the immutable constraints of orbital frequency limits, global launch pad availability, and the severe bandwidth degradation that occurs when millions of terrestrial users attempt to access a finite satellite constellation simultaneously. The consolidated cash usage at SpaceX is not just high, it is fundamentally unsustainable without continuous, massive interventions from the public markets. The historic $75 billion raised during the initial public offering appears to create an impregnable war chest, lifting the company's total cash reserves close to $100 billion. But when measured against a quarterly cash burn rate that has now reached $9 billion, that entire mountain of capital will be completely vaporized in less than 3 years, unless the Anthropic contract remains perfectly stable and the Cursor acquisition immediately yields unprecedented. The ultimate conclusion of this investigative report reveals a profound and troubling transformation. Standalone SpaceX and its revolutionary Starlink division represent an undisputed, highly successful triumph of modern aerospace engineering that fundamentally disrupted global telecommunications. But by forcing a pro forma merger with the toxic assets of X and the capital-intensive ambitions of XAI, Elon Musk has leveraged his greatest asset to finance a highly speculative, multi-billion-dollar computational war against the most deeply capitalized technology monopolies on Earth. With retail investors now holding an estimated 30% of the public float, the global markets have effectively agreed to bankroll a volatile, multi-headed corporate empire where the rocket ships are real, the artificial intelligence is largely rented. And the financial losses, Elon Musk has built his entire legacy on beating deadlines, but the escalating crisis inside the South Texas launch facility proves that his interplanetary timeline has completely decoupled from engineering reality. When the Starship program was officially announced, the global public was promised a fully operational, reusable heavy-lift vehicle capable of carrying 100 tons into orbit by 2022. We are now years behind that initial promise, and the audited financial statements reveal that the space segment has evolved into a persistent, multi-billion-dollar capital drain that is actively jeopardizing the financial health of the parent company. The public relations team has consistently spun every spectacular mid-air explosion as a highly successful data-gathering exercise, but the internal ledger tells a profoundly different story. In 2025 alone, the space segment burned through an astronomical $3 billion in pure research and development costs, followed by an additional $930 million in the first 3 months of 2026. These immense numbers are not yielding a reliable commercial product. Instead, they are funding a series of hazardous and deeply concerning hardware failures that are catching the attention of international. The structural fracture of this engineering narrative became dangerously visible during the catastrophic failure of Starship Flight 7. Due to severe mechanical issues deep within the propulsion matrix, the vehicle's autonomous self-destruct system was triggered directly over the Gulf of Mexico, instantly disintegrating the massive rocket into a kinetic cloud of thousands of metallic fragments. The resulting wreckage did not simply drop harmlessly into empty ocean waters. Instead, supersonic debris rained down across populated areas of the Turks and Caicos, with a massive jagged fragment narrowly missing a resident on a local tennis court, while another piece smashed directly into a civilian vehicle in South Caicos. The physical fallout extended into international airspace, where air traffic controllers were forced to scramble route 11 commercial passenger aircraft out of the descending debris zone, leaving several flights dangerously low on fuel as they navigated the unexpected chaos. The public relations machine immediately attempted to characterize the incident as a minor anomaly. But the reality of falling rocket wreckage, striking sovereign territory, destroyed. The economic consequences of these persistent failures quickly migrated from the launch pad directly to the company's client roster. In May 2024, Japanese billionaire Yusaku Maezawa unilaterally announced the total cancellation of his highly publicized Dear Moon space tourism mission. Maezawa had signed the historic private anchor contract, assuming a commercial flight would take place by the end of 2023. But as his own net worth experienced severe volatility, his confidence in the Starship development timeline completely evaporated. This high-profile defection cost the company an immense source of private funding and signaled to the broader aerospace industry that Musk's Martian deadlines were increasingly viewed as marketing fiction rather than achievable engineering milestones. The operational bleeding only intensified during subsequent tests, culminating in the launch pad catastrophe where a ground test went critical, triggering an explosion that, even when the vehicles managed to clear the launch tower, the final phases of testing remained mired in destructive outcomes. Flight 12 achieved its intended suborbital trajectory, but the vehicle suffered a critical failure in one of its 6 flight engines before exploding instantly upon splashing down in the Indian Ocean. The second stage of the Starship has never been successfully recovered or even attempted to be retrieved, completely undermining the core economic premise of total reusability that Musk used to pitch the vehicle to institutional markets. By continuing to watch, you will see how this massive capital deficit in the launch segment forced Elon Musk to alter the pricing structure of his only profitable business, creating a dangerous ripple effect across the global telecommunications landscape. If you believe the revolutionary promise of Starship can survive this unprecedented financial gravity, make sure to share your thoughts in the comment section below. The reality is that the heavy lift program is trapped in an incredibly expensive development loop, and the money required to sustain it is currently being squeezed directly out of everyday consumers miles below. The single engine of real, undeniable profitability inside Elon Musk's entire corporate architecture is buried far beneath the surface of the connectivity segment. Starlink internet service has scaled at a pace that looks completely miraculous on a standard public ledger, officially reaching a milestone of 10 million global subscribers by the early months of 2026. With nearly 10,000 active satellites successfully deployed into low Earth orbit, this massive network generated a spectacular $4,423 million in operating profit on $11,387 million of revenue during 2025 alone. For millions of users living in isolated rural geographies, maritime crew members on international cruise lines, and commercial aviation passengers crossing the Atlantic, Starlink has effectively transformed from a novel luxury into an absolute utility. The business model appears entirely bulletproof, a recurring subscription machine designed to generate predictable, high-margin cash flows that should theoretically provide the foundational, but a rigorous examination of the underlying metrics hidden deep within the S1 prospectus exposes a silent, devastating structural erosion that threatens to capsize this orbital cash cow. While the raw subscriber count continues to climb, Starlink's global average revenue per user has entered a severe, multi-year freefall. In 2023, the network extracted a healthy average of $99 per month from each active terminal. By 2024, that figure slipped to $82, and by the close of 2025, it collapsed entirely to $66 per month. This massive 33% drop in unit economics reveals that Starlink is hitting an invisible geographic wall, forcing the company to execute an aggressive, low-margin subscriber acquisition strategy. To sustain its public growth narrative, SpaceX is aggressively slashing hardware prices and subscription fees to penetrate lower-income international regions where the local populations simply cannot afford the premium rates traditionally. This collapsing revenue per user creates a dangerous financial mismatch when measured against the unique, unforgiving physics of low Earth orbit infrastructure. Unlike traditional terrestrial telecommunications networks that build fiber optic cables once and depreciate the asset over 30 or 40 years, Starlink's satellite constellations are trapped in a mandatory, highly expensive 5-year replacement cycle. Every single satellite launched by a Falcon 9 rocket will naturally succumb to atmospheric drag, burn up in the upper atmosphere, and require complete replacement every 60 months just to maintain the existing network capacity. Because the heavy-lift Starship program remains chronically delayed and unable to achieve operational orbital recovery, SpaceX cannot deploy its larger, high-capacity version 3 satellites that were specifically engineered to massively increase bandwidth efficiency and justify premium-tier enterprise pricing. Starlink is effectively trapped in a high-maintenance, capital-intensive loop, spending billions of dollars to continue. Are you beginning to see how the financial gravity of these interconnected corporate segments is pulling Elon Musk's empire down to earth? Drop a comment below right now and let me know if you think Starlink can survive this massive internal capital squeeze, or if everyday consumers will ultimately be forced to pay higher monthly bills to subsidize the broader artificial intelligence wars. The structural tension inside the balance sheet deepens significantly when you look at the internal transfer pricing mechanism that SpaceX uses to mask the true operational costs of this orbital network. The connectivity segment does not operate as an independent, self-contained business. Instead, it relies on complex inter-segment transfers, paying massive fees directly to the space segment to cover the continuous, relentless launch costs of the Starlink constellation. This accounting architecture means that the apparent profitability of the satellite internet business is heavily dependent on artificial internal pricing assumptions that can be easily manipulated to present a pristine image to public stock market investors. In reality, the massive capital expenditures required to keep the satellite network functioning are bleeding directly into the research and development budget of the Space Heavy Lift program, leaving the consolidated company with almost no margin for error as its terrestrial life. The massive cloud supercomputer facility operating just outside Memphis, Tennessee, was supposed to be the ultimate crown jewel of Elon Musk's private artificial intelligence infrastructure. But by June 2026, it had instead transformed into the epicenter of an explosive geopolitical and environmental battleground. To supply the staggering amounts of electricity required to keep tens of thousands of liquid-cooled NVIDIA graphics processing units running at maximum capacity, xAI bypassed traditional regulatory channels and quietly installed 59 unpermitted, industrial gas turbines, directly at a secondary facility in nearby Southaven, Mississippi. The immediate consequence of this rapid deployment was a wave of severe community disruption, with local residents quickly filing class action lawsuits detailing near constant low-frequency ground vibrations and auditory pollution that resulted in widespread sleep deprivation and chronic tinnitus across the immediate geographic area. The legal vulnerability intensified dramatically when the NAACP stepped forward to file a sweeping federal citizen lawsuit under the Clean Air Act, presenting detailed environmental impact projections demonstrating that the unpermitted power installation was actively capable of venting over 5,000 tons of smog-forming nitrogen oxides, 400 tons of fine particulate matter, and 47 tons of carcinogenic formaldehyde annually into historically marginalized, majority black neighborhoods. The plaintiffs demanded immediate judicial. The entire trajectory of this domestic environmental dispute took a stunning, highly dramatic turn on June 15, 2026, when the highest levels of the United States federal government suddenly intervened directly into the litigation on behalf of Elon Musk. In an unprecedented move that sent shockwaves through the tech sector, corporate lawyers watched as federal prosecutors filed an official emergency motion seeking the absolute dismissal of the environmental injunction, explicitly arguing under oath that any forced termination of the Mississippi power infrastructure would immediately compromise American national security, economic stability, and critical defense intelligence. To substantiate this extraordinary assertion, the Department of Justice submitted a sworn top-secret court declaration authored by Cameron Stanley, the Pentagon's highly influential Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Officer. Stanley's official testimony pulled back the curtain on a deeply classified defense intelligence restructuring, revealing to the public for the very first time that the United States military had abruptly terminated its long-standing operational contracts with Anthropic after the AI safety startup fundamentally refused to allow its advanced Claude models to be integrated into kinetic targeting applications or automated warfare systems. Desperate for an immediate, hyper-capable replacement to fill the national security vacuum, the Department of War turned its entire attention to XAI, executing a rapid, secret integration that wove a specialized. This highly classified court disclosure officially confirmed that during the strategic combat engagements of Operation Epic Fury, the Pentagon utilized the Grok Gov Model inside its smart systems to autonomously identify, verify, and direct the kinetic deployment of over 2,000 distinct munitions against 2,000 separate targets within a critically compressed 96-hour window. The defense infrastructure now relies so heavily on this corporate integration that the Department of War's secure network actively consumes nearly 2 billion data tokens every single day, effectively processing the equivalent of 6 million pages of raw intelligence reports every 24 hours to sustain active combat targeting arrays. Stanley explicitly warned the presiding federal judge that the Colossus supercomputer complex in Memphis represents one of only 3 enterprise-grade computing installations on Earth certified to process these massive defense workloads, meaning any localized power disruption or turbine shutdown would instantly cripple live military operations across the globe. While this extreme executive intervention successfully shielded Elon Musk from local environmental enforcement and immediate regulatory fines, it exposed a striking and deeply ironic structural transformation that has completely altered the identity of his empire. The world's most celebrated private aerospace company, built on the inspiring public premise of peaceful space exploration and the preservation of human consciousness across the stars, are you beginning to realize how deep this corporate rabbit hole actually goes? Drop a comment below right now and tell me if you believe Elon Musk's hidden transformation into a major defense contractor is a necessary step for Western technology dominance, or if it represents a dangerous betrayal of SpaceX's original civilian mission to open the high frontier. The financial desperation behind this geopolitical pivot becomes blindingly clear when you uncover the secret economics of the data centers themselves, hidden deep inside a highly sensitive accounting disclosure that corporate attorneys accidentally left in early drafts of the public prospectus. PitchBook researchers, tracking the confidential files, discovered that SpaceX has quietly achieved an unprecedented breakthrough in infrastructure engineering, building out its massive supercomputer clusters at a capital cost of just $2,700,000 per megawatt. In the hyper-competitive world of artificial intelligence, where traditional Silicon Valley titans routinely spend 4 times that amount to construct basic server farms, this hyper-lean efficiency should have been celebrated as a historic triumph. Instead, the disclosure was abruptly scrubbed from the final public filing because it exposed a deeply cynical corporate reality. Elon Musk did not assemble this massive computational network to power a ground-up revolution in consumer software. He built it to serve as a high-margin corporate life raft, turning a company originally founded to explore the stars into a predatory graphics processing unit landlord. The true scale of this computational real estate play crystallized in May 2026, when Anthropic signed a staggering cloud services agreement to rent server capacity directly from the newly consolidated SpaceX AI division. Under the rigid terms of this massive contract, Anthropic is legally bound to pay SpaceX an astronomical $1,250 million every single month for a continuous 3-year period, injecting $15 billion a year of guaranteed, recurring cash directly into the balance sheet of ticker symbol SPCX. For Anthropic, this deal was a brutal operational necessity born out of severe server starvation. Despite hitting an annualized revenue run rate of $30 billion by April 2026, fueled by the explosive adoption of its automated software developer ecosystem Claude Code, the company was literally suffocating under its own compute constraints, forcing management to progressively tighten rate limits on premium subscribers just to keep the platform from collapsing. By capturing this massive rent check, SpaceX can completely recoup the entire upfront construction cost of a new supercomputer cluster in less than 7 days of live operation, generating an immediate, hyper-lucrative cash flow that perfectly matches the combined annual revenue of its rocket launch and satellite internet divisions combined. Yet, relying on a competitor's venture capital funding to sustain your own public valuation is an incredibly dangerous game, which is exactly why Elon Musk moved instantly to execute a stunning $60 billion defensive buyout of Anosphere, the viral startup behind the AI-powered coding assistant Cursor. Cursor has emerged as the absolute epicenter of the rapidly expanding trend of vibe coding, a paradigm shift where software engineers utilize autonomous AI agents to draft, refactor, and deploy massive enterprise codebases via simple conversational commands. By absorbing Cursor directly into the SpaceX ecosystem, Musk is attempting to execute a massive data grab, ingesting the real-world interactions and keystrokes of hundreds of thousands of expert software engineers to train the upcoming Grok Gov Model and close the immense performance gap with industry leaders. However, the financial architecture of this $60 billion transaction reveals a high-stakes gamble structured entirely in Class A common stock, creating a volatile mechanism where any prolonged post-IPO correction in the price of ticker symbol SPCX risks diluting the existing public float by a staggering 80%. This setup effectively transfers the immense speculative risk of a pre-revenue software startup directly onto public retail investors, forcing everyday shareholders to bankroll a multi-billion-dollar defensive maneuver. Are you starting to see how the lines between deep space exploration and terrestrial corporate warfare have completely blurred? Drop a comment below right now, and let me know if you believe this massive acquisition is a stroke of financial genius, or if the public markets are simply being used to subsidize an incredibly volatile tech empire. Elon Musk has built a sprawling technological empire that captured the imagination of the entire world, but the severe mathematical reality revealed in the wake of the historic public offering proves that even the most celebrated visionary cannot permanently outrun the laws of financial gravity. Ticker symbol SPCX made its triumphant debut on the Nasdaq exchange by raising an unprecedented $75 billion from a global public that was desperate to own a piece of the eventual migration to Mars. But the moment the initial trading euphoria subsided, institutional analysts immediately began tearing through the audited pro forma financial statements, and the resulting sell-off dragged the company's total market value directly below that of Amazon in less than 72 hours. Public stock market investors are finally waking up to a deeply sobering structural reality that was hidden beneath a decade of pristine public relations. SpaceX is no longer a streamlined, high-margin aerospace pioneer dedicated exclusively to opening the high frontier. By forcing a corporate consolidation with the collapsing business model of X and the hyper-expensive server demands of XAI, Elon Musk has fundamentally leveraged his ultimate crown jewel to underwrite a highly volatile, multi-billion-dollar computational war against the most deeply capitalized technology monopolies on Earth. The ultimate vulnerability of this consolidated empire lies in the extreme volatility of its core operational cash flow. The historic $75 billion injected by the public listing appears to create an impregnable mountain of security, lifting the company's total cash reserves close to an unprecedented $100 billion. But when measured against a consolidated quarterly cash burn rate that has now accelerated to a staggering $9 billion, that massive mountain of capital will be completely vaporized in less than 3 years unless every single speculative piece of Musk's gamble executes with flawless precision. The $15 billion annual life raft provided by renting server capacity to Anthropic remains deeply dependent on a competitor's ability to continuously secure venture capital funding, while the $60 billion stock buyout of Cursor introduces an immense risk of structural dilution for everyday retail shareholders who now control an estimated 30% of the public float. The public markets have effectively agreed to bankroll a volatile, multi-headed corporate ecosystem where the rocket ships are real, the artificial intelligence is largely rented, and the underlying losses are far more severe than anyone ever dreamed. If you want to stay ahead of the next massive structural shifts shaping the global tech economy before Wall Street admits the truth, click directly on the video appearing on your screen right now to join us for our next deep dive investigation into the hidden machinery of the world's most powerful empires.